Good evening. I'm Jeannie Jacob, President of the Seminary Ridge Civic Association. We will begin our third forum in a moment, and we're waiting for all of the attendees to be entered. So please bear with us for a moment or two as they enter. Again, we'll wait another minute for all of the residents who have registered for this third seminar to enter this evening. Thank you for your patience. We'll begin shortly. Again, we'll wait another minute for all of the residents who registered for this third forum to be admitted. We thank you for your patience, and we will begin shortly. Good evening again, and welcome to Seminary Ridge Civic Association's forum, the Seminary Ridge Civic Association. We're pleased to have you with us this evening for the third of our 4 SRCA forums being held this May. The first 3 forums are for the candidates running for the mayoral candidates. 13 of the 15 candidates for city council are Democrats and will be running in the Democrat primary on June 8th. Of the other 2 candidates, one is an independent and the other is a Republican. Early voting has already begun, and the June 8th primary is open to all registered voters in Alexandria. We hope that these 4 forums will help you become a more informed voter. I want to thank SRCA board member Joe Sestak for organizing the 4 forums and contacting all 17 candidates participating in them. Also, I thank SRCA's block captains for delivering flyers throughout the Seminary Ridge. Finally, I want to thank everyone who has contributed questions for the forums. We appreciate your interest, have given them to our moderator, and he will include these questions in one of the 4 as time allows. Our man behind the scenes tonight, who will be monitoring the timing of the candidates' answers, is Richie Weiblinger. He's a fairly new Seminary Ridge resident. Our moderator for tonight's forum is Mike Souza, SRCA's former president and current parliamentarian. Mike will explain the rules for the forum, introduce the candidates, and then ask them the questions that were submitted by many of you. Excuse me. Now I turn the program over to Mike Souza, who will introduce tonight's 5 candidates for Alexandria City Council. Mike, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Jeannie. I appreciate the introduction, and I want to welcome everybody for joining us this evening. This is candidate forum number 3 for Alexandria City Council, and we look forward to a great evening. My name is Mike Souza, and I am currently serving as the SRCA parliamentarian and will serve as a moderator for this evening's discussion. With us this evening are Councilwoman Amy Jackson, Mr. Kevin Harris, Mr. Mark Schiffler, Mr. James Lewis, and Ms. Florence King. Mr. Lewis has to leave us after the opening statements due to an emergent traffic board meeting, but he did want to join and give his welcome and introduction to everyone. My goal is to be as invisible as possible and to allow all the candidates to make their cases directly to the residents of Seminary Ridge as to why they deserve our vote. This is not a debate, but a directed question and answer period with the candidates. Questions have been submitted in advance, as Jeannie had indicated, which are most, and I have determined which are most relevant to the concerns of Seminary Ridge residents. As Jeannie also indicated, in order to keep this forum to a tolerable time frame, we have broken the city council field into 3 nights and the mayoral candidates to a separate evening. Please plan on joining us for the mayoral candidate on Thursday night. Here are the rules for this evening's question and answer period. Each candidate will make an opening statement no longer than 5 minutes. In the statement, you'll highlight the following: who you are, including how long you've lived in Alexandria, your background and experience, and any relevant personal information you wish to include. Why you're running for city council, and why you believe you are qualified to represent the citizens of the city. What are the key goals and objectives that you wish to focus on if elected? And then you can end with what you think is the most important issue facing the city today. I will then ask each candidate to address the questions in 1 minute segments, one of the submitted questions. During those, both the 5 minute question the 5 minute introduction period and the 1 minute question responses, Richie Weidlinger, our timekeeper, will hold up a yellow card at 30 seconds and a red card as a final warning at 10 seconds. After that, you will be muted unless at my discretion there's a follow-up question that you need to that I want to ask, or there's something that needs to be clarified about what you said. Then hopefully we'll keep those to the minimum, but we want you to at least finish your thought before we'll mute you. But if you go on too long, Richie will just hit the button, and because we want to keep this on time. So, the questions will be kept to a minimum, and I will rotate the questions through alphabetically, with whoever answered first will then go last, and then whoever was second will move up to answer the next question first. I'm excited to hear everything you have to say and all the great ideas that you have to help Alexandria and Seminary Ridge continue to be the type of city that we are proud to call home. With the first 5 minute introduction, let's start with Councilwoman Jackson.
Well, I absolutely appreciate having the opportunity to speak with Seminary Ridge Civic Association tonight. I am Amy Jackson, and I'm currently running in my I'm serving my first term and running for re-election for my second. So I would appreciate your vote. I'm so proud of our city. It's been a challenging term with the onset of this global pandemic in this last year for everyone. But as everyone knows, Alexandria is fully resilient, absolutely resilient, and will overcome the toughest challenges and build back better in every instance. I know resilience growing up here and attending Patrick Henry Hammond and TC Williams. I'm a graduate from TC. I am the daughter of a divorced single mom who worked 40 hours a week plus overtime to make ends meet and provide for me and her. And with that gumption and that drive, that work ethic that I learned from her, resilience is absolutely instilled in me. So in these challenging times, I reflect on what got me here, knowing my past experiences will continue to help me lead as I run for Alexandria's past and its future. I'm running to improve our infrastructure, implement our digital broadband, and preserve and promote our Echo City, its resilience and stamina in the face of this current health crisis, which has led us to this economic crisis and childcare education crisis. So I will always support our people and our programs, allocating funds to our schools, increasing wages for our educators and public safety professionals, continuing to implement creative ways to bring affordable housing opportunities to our city so our youth can come back here and live where they grew up. And in doing this and more, we need to bring equity and equality to the table at every sitting. So this last year has been tough for everyone, but we've seen the education crisis and childcare crisis. And because women are expected to care for their families, having to choose between their careers and their families, and most cannot care for their families if they don't have their jobs. So I'm also leading to help women in the workforce and their families. I'm running to ensure Alexandria continues its strength as we've known it, as we reimage and rebuild our city post-COVID. Carlisle, Old Town, Delray, Waterfront, Seminary, and West End continuing to reopen to our visitors while supporting our small businesses and restaurants with federal and grant dollars to preserve and strengthen our economy while expanding it, but doing this in a way that also allows for our continued safety and success overcoming our COVID-19 cases, ensuring we are keeping an eye on the prize of mitigating the coronavirus with masks and social distancing as needed, providing accessible, equitable vaccine distributions. Being inoculated will help our city open up safely and efficiently faster. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilwoman Jackson. Next is Mr. Harris.
All right. Thank you everybody for having me here today. I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to be able to connect with the Seminary Ridge Association. My name is Kevin Harris, and I'm running for City Council. I'm a minister at the Love of Christ Church in Delray, local small business owner of Hoop Life, a basketball services company that conducts the basketball camps and classes for the Alexandria Recreation Department and other locations in DC and Maryland. Also, I'm a community organizer. I've called Alexandria home since attending John Adams Elementary. My mother, a single working class woman, believed I would receive more opportunities living with my uncle at Southern Towers in the West End rather than inner city DC. I love Alexandria because living here saved me. Like many boys from similar backgrounds, I could have been another unfortunate statistic. My love for Alexandria motivated me to return after graduating from Alabama State University and start my family. Now my wife of 17 years and I raise our 4 daughters in North Old Town. My love for Alexandria is why I chose to launch my business Hoop Life in Alexandria. It's why I serve as a minister at a church in Alexandria. And it's why I serve on city and nonprofit boards in Alexandria. Being raised by a Black working class woman that wasn't highly educated, you get early life lessons on what people respect. Most people don't respect people because they are fellow human beings. They only respect labels or titles. Unfortunately, my mom carried labels that cause people to disregard her voice. However, an individual's net worth doesn't equal their self-worth, nor does educational achievement equal intelligence. Everyone brings value to our community. The love that I have for Alexandria and the lessons I've learned from my mother are why I've spent the last decade working to make Alexandria more equitable. I've gotten tangible results community organizing. As the ARHA Citywide Resident Association president, I led a massive GOTV effort, doubling voter turnout, and hosted a working class forum for political candidates so that elected officials would take note of our voices. Also, I worked to ensure minority residents were appointed to the Economic Opportunity Commission, the Northern Juvenile Justice Detention Center Commission, Adult Detention Center Advisory Board, and other city boards to increase the representation of minority voices. Now I serve as a commissioner for ARHA, where we provide affordable housing at the lowest AMI level. I'm on the voice strategy team where I've worked with Governor Northam, Attorney General Herring, and other elected officials on multiple issues that impact our community, such as raising the felony threshold level and ending the practice of suspending driver's licenses for unpaid court fees, resulting in the restoration of driving rights for 670,000 Virginians. During COVID-19 with Voice, I lobbied Governor Northam for the continued extension of the eviction moratorium, successfully protecting thousands of Virginians who lost their jobs, who lost their jobs from losing their homes. The relational policing initiative that I created with the Resident Association Safety Committee to rebuild trust between communities of color and the police has already begun to make an impact, as it was highlighted by Chief Brown as an effective initiative that he wants to replicate across Alexandria. Also, I'm endorsed by the Alexandria firefighters, Nova Labor, Leona, and the ATU workers because they know they can count on me to support our working class and essential workers. When the firefighters requested for people to come out with them to gain community support for the collective bargaining agreement that was just passed, I was the only city council candidate that showed up. That's me. I'm about action and not words. I'm running for city council not to build a political resume or to enact boardroom policies that aren't supported by our community. I'm running because I love the city that saved me, and I believe that Alexandria can be that city for even more people if we create more equity. Equity means prompt attention to our infrastructure because basements have been flooding for years every time it rains. It means having the opportunity to call the city you serve home. It means having children afforded the same educational opportunities regardless of their race. It means ensuring all voices are heard. In closing, I've been building equity in Alexandria before I considered running for city council because I know communities work better when everyone has a seat at the table and we take care of the folks that take care of us, like our firefighters, teachers, and police officers. I ask that you support me to serve on city council so we can continue creating a more equitable Alexandria, but more efficiently and at a larger scale. If you want to learn more about my campaign, you can go to www.voteforkevinharris.com. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harris. I appreciate your comments. Next up is Ms. Florence King.
Oh, not me. I don't want to follow him. Okay. I'm Florence King, and I'm running for city council. And first of all, I would like to thank the Seminary Ridge Civic Association and for organizing this forum this evening. And I wish it was more civic organizations out here who stepped up to the plate, but it's just a few who did the same thing. But I just want to share with you a little bit about me. Some people might know, so I don't want to take it for granted, but I am the descendant of my great-great-great-grandmother who was a slave on George Washington's plantation, and she was emancipated in 1812. When she was emancipated, she had a son, which was my great-great-grandfather, and he was a freed slave on George Washington's plantation. He didn't move out, he stayed there. So I'm a descendant of a slave, and they used to call it a George Washington's plantation, but it's now called George Washington's estate. I have been in the city of Alexandria for 30 years, and really this year marked 30 years that my company have been in business. So in concert, April the 15th, I celebrated 30 years of being in business. And my company specialized in personal finances. And on April the 15th, I launched my candidacy for running for city office. So I celebrated two things. I stepped out and decided to run for city council. Now, I'm a graduate of George Mason University. And I majored in sociology and I minored in business administration. However, I went to Howard University School of Business, and doing that with my company majors in personal finances, which deals with investment advisory service, financial literacy or education, as well as credit management. I have also done a series of workshops and classes at Bowie State University, Gallaudet University, as well as DC, I think they call it DC Teachers University or DC Teachers College. But I really, it's enough about that. I love the city. And one of the reasons why I am running in the city of Alexandria, I'm really running as a foot soldier. I'm advocating on the residents. And my mantra is definitely, I am advocating for all of Alexandria. A lot of times we forget about that. And especially the West End. I lived on the West End. I know a lot of people on the West End, but I've lived on several neighborhoods here in the city. And a little bit about me, what I have been doing here in the city. And these are things that I have been doing as a volunteer. And it wasn't like something that I wanted to do just to get my name out there. It's something that was passionate, that was close to my heart. And right now, I'm currently the chair of the Alexandria United Way, which we have our board meeting this Wednesday. And what we do is a lot of things for the city. And I had developed as the chair of that of the United Way Regional Council, I developed a collaborative meeting with the I would say the city manager, Mark Jinks, but at the time, Rashad Young was the city manager, and we would meet quarterly. And what he wanted to do, he really had some insight because he had the same position that I have now when he was living in Tennessee. So he knew exactly what the United Way can do for communities. And so what we do is we kind of advocate on behalf of the charities here in the city of Alexandria. We raise funds and we give that money to the charities like Alive, Conferences Shelter. These are nonprofits, and a lot of people see these organizations and they're thinking that it's part of the city. But yes, city give them funding, but we give them funding too. And when we give them funding, it takes a lot of money from off of the budget of the city because we are in concert and in partnership. And so I thought that was a good way to actually collaborate with the city and partnership in that way. So basically, I also was the chair of the Alexandria Commission on Employment. And with that being said, then the Commission on Employment, I offered training services free for residents who are seeking employment. And I felt that is a necessity. And so we offered training services for financial education. But vote for me in November. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Next on to Mr. Jim Lewis.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. And again, as was mentioned, unfortunately, I do have a traffic and parking board meeting, so I'm going to have to leave a few minutes early. But I did want to say hi to my neighbors. I live off of Duke Street on the West End and started my time in Alexandria in the Fox Chase apartments. So I'm very familiar with this area. And this is sort of, I go to the post office at Breedley on the regular basis and, know all the good ways to get to and from 95 when there's traffic backed up on the West End. So like was said, my name's James Lewis and I'm running for Alexandria City Council to ensure that all voices are heard so the best ideas move forward for our city. COVID-19's created no series of challenges for us, but we also had challenges related to traffic congestion, schools being over capacity, and homes flooding every time it rained on a regular basis before COVID. So our challenges have only redoubled in the city, and the only path forward for us to solve these problems is to invest in the people who live here and their expertise and bring those voices to the table so we get the right innovative solutions that move forward, that aren't just solutions for the next 5 or 10 years, but solutions that serve us well into the next 50 or 100 years. Like a lot of folks, I actually moved to the city after college. I went to College of William and Mary and graduated during the height of the last recession. So I ended up back home working for Student Conservation Association in Pittsburgh and, sort of started working my network. It took me 4 or 5 months to find something, but I eventually found a job in Accokeek, Maryland. So I moved to the region and was trying to figure out where I wanted to live and knew I definitely didn't want to be in Accokeek. So was looking around at places and had the lucky opportunity through the Young Dems of Virginia to actually know a bunch of folks that lived in Alexandria. So they sent me a few listings and I ended up in Fox Chase and instantly fell in love with Alexandria and knew that this was going to be home for the next 10 years. So, and home for the long term. So started out in Fox Chase, launched my job in PR, had the opportunity to work on some amazing issues from drug addiction, worked for the aluminum industry on sustainability issues, worked on nuclear weapons issues, which is how I got to know Admiral Sestak, who helped organize today's event. And then that also took me to 6.5 years on Capitol Hill, serving as comms director for 2 members of the Congressional Black Caucus, including the chair of the Health Brain Trust during COVID, a pandemic that has taken a disproportionate toll on communities of color. So what I spent those 6.5 years doing was communicating with people who normally don't hear from their member of Congress, don't think about it, and trying to figure out how do we make ourselves a part of their lives so we can improve their lives for the better? How do we get them seats at the table? Because a lot of times when you can't move legislation, you can use the power of your office, as the President Obama used to say, the pen and the phone. Sometimes when you call and you say, hi, I'm from Congresswoman so-and-so's office, you can open a lot of doors that folks can't. So having done that for the last 6.5 years, I want to bring that experience of reaching people who aren't spoken to and finding ways to empower them to the city, because we know that the challenges that we face are significant and we need to move forward on all of those. Locally, I've been involved in the Young Dems. I was an ADC precinct captain in South Old Town when I lived in the Laos Crouch precinct. And then a few years ago, my other half and I, we got a condo in North Old Town and got involved in Notice. So I'm very familiar too with the important role that civic associations play in our community. And the important voice that you serve in providing resident feedback to the city It's really hard to sort of reach folks on a regular basis, and folks are busy. They've got kids that need to go to soccer practice, meals that need prepped, parents that need taken care of. And so civic associations are really a mechanism that allow people to work through their trusted networks and work through their neighbors to share feedback with the city. Unfortunately, at times we found that those networks haven't been given the due respect that they deserve. And I'd like to bring that voice and perspective to council of someone who's actually served on a civic association and knows what that means and knows what a time investment that is to your neighbors, because you're doing it because you want to benefit your community. As was mentioned, and what I have to run for is the Traffic and Parking Board. I'm the current vice chair of the Traffic and Parking Board, have been on the board for 7 years. And what we do as a board is go block by block through the city, solving problems so everyone's safer. We do everything from stop signs and curb cuts and speed limits to no turn signs and big major re-engineering projects that re-envision transportation in the city. Some of them I've been supportive of, and most of them I've been supportive of, a few I haven't been. But what I really like about this board is it's an opportunity for us to listen to residents, listen to staff input, and bring in experts and actually find the solution that works for those neighbors block by block. And then what we also do is make sure that we're not just solving a problem on one block and pushing it to the next block. We want to make sure that we're solving problems in a comprehensive way so everyone wins. And I'd like to bring that experience to council of finding those win-win-wins, of listening.
All right, thank you, Jim, and have a good parking board meeting this evening. We'll miss the rest of your questions.
Thank you.
And lastly, Mr. Mark Schiffer.
How you doing? I want to thank the Seminary Ridge Civic Association for having us out today. I'm going to start to tell you a little bit about my background, and tell you a little bit about some of the issues that I think are important, and then tell you why I got to the race. So I grew up, was born in New Orleans, grew up in New Jersey. My mom, when she divorced, we went through a period where she lost her job after being divorced, actually being separated, which made it worse. So no child support because she wasn't divorced. We went through some pretty rough times. There was a time where we were hungry and we were served an eviction notice like around Christmas time by some wonderful landlords that we had at the time. But she was lucky. We were lucky that she had credit cards, and because she was able to take on $20,000 worth of debt that she carried with her for the next 20 years. She got us through that period, wound up getting a job. And then I went on to be the first person in my family to graduate from college. I went to school at Cornell, got a degree in mathematics. Then I went out to California, to Cal State Long Beach, where I got a master's degree in computer science. Taught computer science for a couple of years out there before going to Boston University, where I was pursuing a PhD in computational neuroscience. I went on to work in industry for a while. As a software engineer with expertise in artificial intelligence and big data and fun tech stuff. Followed my wife down to Alexandria about 4 years ago. She got a position. She's a NASA scientist. She got a position at NASA headquarters. She runs a program, physical oceanography, which is part of climate science at NASA. So I came down, took a year off, got involved with the neighborhood, ultimately wound up being a part of the neighborhood association. I was on that gang task force, and that takes us to now. So the reason that I'm running, there's, I think, a number of issues that are facing the city that aren't being well addressed. We have problems with equity. Obviously, there's problems with flooding, which are not just because of the lack of investment in infrastructure over the years, but along with climate change, which is increasing the intensity and frequency of storms. We're having more and more flooding events. Affordable housing is a problem that's been around for a while. I think with HQ2 coming, it's only going to get worse. Education, as a former professor and as somebody whose success I find in large part to my education. Education is very important to me. I think we ought to be funding universal pre-K. I think that's an equity issue that needs to be addressed. And then there's a whole list of other issues as well. There's ethics, there's the environment, tree canopy, Strawberry Run, Taylor Run, transportation. We need better transportation for all modalities, Seminary Road, Development needs to be done sustainably. I'm not against development, but I think we ought to be doing the appropriate development for appropriate areas in the city. We have a very heterogeneous city, and what's realistic and good in some parts of the city may not be realistic and good in other parts of the city. Representation and again, education. So what is it that got me into the race? What got me into the race was actually my experience with the city. And I think folks at Seminary Ridge have had the same experience. I was very active when Seminary Road was going on, just as you all have been active around Strawberry Run. And what I found is that the city is just not doing a good job. And the question is, why is that? And as an executive, I'm now a tech executive. I work for a company that does work for the government, artificial intelligence. We go in and solve hard problems. And I was hired because of my broad background and education. I can come in and I can quickly find people who know what they're talking about, find out if they're full of it or not, and get them to work solving problems. And in addition, because my background as an engineer, I can help them solving problems. And I think that's what we're missing both in city council and the city. So we've got city staff who often are quite disrespectful to residents, right? Residents are very engaged in the city. We have some wonderful residents, all educational backgrounds, all very engaged, and a lot of expertise that we can draw on. Unfortunately, that expertise isn't mirrored in the city itself, in the city staff. And what often happens, I think, is that they don't know the difference between a crank and somebody who knows what they're talking about because they don't have the expertise themselves. And the city council doesn't have enough people on council who have expertise at knowing if the city staff is full of it or not. And so essentially that's what I think I would bring to city council is that executive experience and the ability to kind of straighten things up. And I think I'm out of time,
Right.
so leave it there.
Thank you. Very informative opening comments. And the first question, we will start with Councilwoman Jackson. It is the last city council ignored the 13th Alexandria Civic Associations that opposed the road diet on Seminary Road. What do you see as the role of civic associations in the city policy making process?
Well, Mike, that's a great question, and I really appreciate it because everyone should know that I was the loudest about Seminary Road when it happened, and I talk about disconcerting, not listening to our residents. 13 civic associations had signed on, and I couldn't get the vote. So, and it was a close vote. It was 4-3, and you just go, I just needed one the other way to go with us, and man, and we still need that one now. So, and if I'm reelected and we get the votes, of course, that'll be one of the first things I'm going to look at in January. So, among other things, but I really believe that obviously city council is, for as much as they say they listen to everybody's voice, then they go and vote in a way that honestly shows that they weren't listening, or if they did, they didn't really recognize and drill down on why the residents were saying what they're saying and still continue to. So many issues, we see the same thing over and over and over again. And so I know, I fully believe that everyone in Alexandria should voice their opinion, should come to us at council, should, you know, say what they need to say. And honestly, we need to look at how we can get some expertise also, to Mr. Schiffer's point about we don't have the experts on council, and we don't really have them in a lot of the situations we need them in on our city staff. So things that we need to be looking at. Absolutely. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Same question to you, Ms. King. Did you need me to repeat the question for you?
Who did you ask? You said Florence King?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I didn't hear you say Florence King. Okay, great. I really feel that, yes, city council, if they were really more in tune to community engagement, whether it's the civic organizations, associations around the city, so we can get better opinions. A lot of times they feel that, okay, our opinions, because I consider myself a resident in the city of Alexandria, it doesn't weigh that much, but I have to agree with Amy. Amy mentioned that it's a lot of people in the city. We have expertise as well, and we need that input. And so with us not having that, it's kind of hard to make decisions, and you're making decisions without transparency. So I feel that we need to actually regroup and actually include everybody when we make these decisions, and everybody will be more trustworthy or more trusting in our decisions or outcomes. So I have to just say more community engagement and civic engagement. And
All right, thank you. Mr. Schiffer.
Yeah, I want to start by thanking Councilman Jackson, because I agree that she was very much on the side of right there. So in answer to the question, I think that the Civic Association should take a larger part in representation. I think it's a good way. Right now, the way that we're represented, as everybody knows, all council members are at large. That's 160,000 people that we have to represent. It's kind of absurd. I'm a fan of the idea of wards or some kind of hybrid system to kind of reduce that a little bit. But another way that we should approach that is by taking the feedback from the neighborhood associations, which can aggregate ideas and what people want, and kind of bring that to city council to listen to. I think in terms of Seminary Road, what we saw was a decision that had already been made, and reasons to do the decision that was already been made, and that's kind of why we were seeing what we were seeing at the that there was an appearance of not listening. So.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, Mr. Harris, same question. Role of civic associations in.
So they play an important role because I think as a public official, it's very important to hear from the constituents, and our job is to kind of reflect the sentiments of the communities that are impacted, which is one of the reasons why I served as the president of the Citywide Residents Association for ARHA. I reorganized that entire community. It's 28 different properties across the city. We created I created a resident council at each of those properties for that very reason, because I believe that we have to also get a broader spectrum of voices. You know what I mean? Because sometimes if we only look at a certain population or a certain segment, we miss certain people that are being impacted by the situation. Even in terms of, I created a safety committee, which is another thing to kind of build a bridge between the police department and communities of color, because it's very important that we hear from our community and hear from the entire community in order to have a stronger community. All right, thanks. That's all. I only have the 10 seconds.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks so much. All right. Next question is regarding the upcoming Duke Street project that they're looking at modernization and traffic lanes on Duke Street. And do you believe that there's a demand for dedicated bus lanes on Duke Street between Landmark and Telegraph Road? And do you prioritize public transportation and bicycles over personal vehicles? So the start is with you, Ms. King.
Before we start, can you repeat the end of that question, please?
Okay. Do you prioritize public transportation and bicycles over personal vehicles?
I don't, because I look at it right in that small stretch. People don't take in consideration there are businesses there as well. And so I have been actually talking to those businesses along that stretch. Now, basically, I think it would be unfair for someone to go to those particular businesses by bus. And to me, that if you're purchasing something from those businesses along that stretch, you have to have a vehicle. So I just don't, I just feel that a happy medium would be appropriate to not eliminate cars completely, but to be able to maybe have, some buses, but not eliminate cars altogether. That is my stand on it.
Okay, Mr. Schiffer.
Yes. So in answer to there were a couple questions in there. One is I haven't looked at the numbers, so I don't know if it supports the demand currently. That would be something that if I were elected to council, I would absolutely look at the numbers and not what we want people to do, but what people would actually do. And I think what we get from staff a lot is we get promises about what will happen when things are done, and those promises those predictions are never correct. In terms of prioritizing public transit or bikes, I don't. And you know, my wife is a climate scientist. I've driven an electric car for a long time. I take public transit when I can. I think people should. But I think the way that we move people out of personal cars is not by making it more difficult for them to drive, but by making it easier for them to choose alternatives. And in this case, you know, that may be something that we look at. That may be a reason to put in dedicated buses. But I think buses can make it down Duke Street pretty well for the demand that we have right now. But whatever we do, I think it's improving things and not making things worse is the way to get things done.
All right, thank you. Mr. Harris.
Yes, so this is a great question because I think the thing to consider is taking a grander or a broader view of the situation. There's so many families and so many people who don't have cars. You know, we have a lot of people, especially minorities, working class, low income people who can't afford to have cars to get places. I know me growing up, my mother, she never had a license. So how would we have gotten around? So I think it's very important to make sure that we think about that and we are able to support those individuals so that they can get places where they need to go. You know, and also it helps out in terms of one of the things Mark was talking about in terms of our environment, which is another issue that putting more cars on the road. But I think it's a balance. We have to look at them both, but we have to take into consideration all those families and all those children who need to get around the city, but they don't have the transportation to do it. They need to be able to get to their jobs. They need to be able to get to school. They need to be able to do their laundry, all these different things that people rely on public transportation for. So thank you.
All right, and last response is Ms. Jackson.
Yes, thank you. So the transit way there, Duke Street. So there, I agree that with Ms. King, there are a number of businesses that you can get to through public transportation because that's what's happening right now, as well as cars. I do think cars serve a purpose, especially for large families. I know Mr. Harris brought up doing laundry. I know we went to the laundromat a lot growing up when I was living in Fox Chase, and because the bottom basement, well, it's kind of creepy, but anyway, I'll leave that there. But for women, honestly, for women, it was dark and dungeon-like. Anyway, so we would throw everything in the car and get to the laundromat. However, there's also Landmark Mall that is being redeveloped with Inova, and I know a transit center will be there. So we just have to look at, again, sensible planning, not taking away lanes for cars, but if needed to somehow redo it with a bus transit lane and or bike lanes without taking away people's property either. So that's another issue with that. So yes, we need to look at the data a little bit more in feasibility studies. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. All right, next question is a recent Virginia Department of Transportation study identified 6 intersections in Alexandria leading to and parallel to I-395 as high accident rate areas, all in low income communities. The highest accident rate intersection is right in front of Southern Towers on West Seminary Road, which has a $44,000 median income level. The 2,300 families units have also endured 540 evictions proceedings since CMI recently acquired the property last August. Do you support funding efforts from city, state, and federal governments to better serve this community by reconfiguring this roadway and the intersection for traffic safely? So to start that question is to Mr. Schiffer.
Yes, absolutely. And this was one of the things that distressed me most about Seminary Road. Putting in bike lanes for rich old white guys on a stretch of road that, if you look at the city's data, is shown to be one of the most safest roads in the city, where the part of the road just like a block from where they did the road diet is where you're talking about, where all those accidents were, which is where the attention should have been focused. We've done nothing. So absolutely, I think it's clear that in terms of equity, we misprioritize the funds of the city. We have a lot of funds in the city. We have a $750 million budget. 750 billion would be great, but it's not. So I think we need to be spending that money in neighborhoods that are underserved, and stop putting in parks for people who already live in nice houses like myself.
All right, thank you. Mr. Harris.
Yes, absolutely. I always say that I believe that budgets are moral documents. And so we'd have to make sure that we are taking care of the individuals who are most vulnerable in our community. And that's something that I've been advocating for since day one, being a part of a very marginalized community with ARHA, as well as even at the state level this year with Voice during COVID-19 lobbying to get the eviction moratorium extended with Governor Northam, which was a very successful thing, but it was also good because it kept so many people in their homes. And so we have to make sure that we're taking care of people and hearing from people and reaching out to them, especially those of our population who are most vulnerable. So thanks. Don't need the other 30, I'm good. Don't take it long. That's what I'm about, man, taking care of the people. So.
All right. Councilwoman Jackson.
Yes, sir. So a few things that I think need to be reworked in the city. We have a repaving plan that is unfortunately how we end up doing the projects that need to be done. And I think that needs to be reversed. I think projects that, yes, our vulnerable communities should be served, and they should be a priority, honestly. And so when I see that the repaving projects are the priority, and then fixing intersections is second, especially over there at Southern Towers, where, they had plenty of issues already. They just have quality of life issues, and I don't feel that they're being taken care of. And other communities in our city as well need to be prioritized, their quality of life. Yes, absolutely. So we need to fix that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. King.
Yes, I have to agree with every one of the panelists, because it would be a travesty if we didn't do anything about these busy intersections. And it's so sad because these are people who are overlooked. And just like Kevin mentioned, they are vulnerable, they are at risk. And a lot of people feel that they don't, their problems is not as big as some of these small problems where some of the wealthy can fix for themselves. And so I feel that's where our money should go. If we have any additional funding, we should think about these busy intersections. We're talking about people's lives. So if we can't, I think the new board needs to make that a top priority, because basically intersections and traffic and things like that, something can be done about it. It's not impossible. So I agree with every panelist here.
All right, thank you. Now a little bit different subject. Presently, the review team for stream restoration alternatives for Strawberry Run will include only city staff, the city's EPC committee, and probably the city's contractors for Taylor and Strawberry Run. Will you support including a scientific representative chosen by the Strawberry Run residents for the review team, or having an objective third party conduct the review to assure its results are credible? We'll start with Mr. Harris, please.
So absolutely, yes. I believe in transparency. I'm a minister at the Love of Christ Church. So my whole life, everything that I do is predicated upon integrity. And I feel like if you don't have anything to hide, then open up the books and see what you want to see. And then I just believe it also speaks to having that community engagement. I think that we do have talented people, and I think we want to make sure that people understand what we're doing, which is very important because everyone's going to be impacted by the decisions. Being a small business owner, I do the same thing all the time, you know, with people when they're asking questions and they want to know. I have no issue with disclosing what's going on because it just makes the working relationship better. And so I think it's one of those things that we have to do. You know, I don't even think it's one of those optional things. I think it's something that we open up and allow people to be a part of the process. And then regardless of whichever direction it goes in, they'll understand what happened. And so, thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilwoman Jackson.
Yes, thank you. So I do agree with this suggestion. I think it'd be a great suggestion. I think city staff doesn't have the expertise in stream restoration. And I don't believe the EPC may or may not have some of that expertise, but because they work honestly, volunteer basis, but they work for the council. So if we want to have absolute transparency concerning our stream restoration projects, Strawberry Run, Taylor Run, Lucky Run, then we need to have somebody who, whether it, and I actually prefer a third party objective view. Instead of having our residents honestly find, you know, everybody should have a voice, but it would be a better solution, I think, to have somebody who is transparent, objective to the situation at hand, to give us the direct data and suggestions that they have, being the expert. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Schiffer.
Yes, as a scientist myself and being married to a scientist, I have high regard for the opinions of scientists. I absolutely think we should have an objective scientist taking a look at that. And I would go a little bit further even to say that, you know, in general, the city should be not only consulting with experts, but opening up the results of those consultations to the residents, right? Like it, you know, as Mr. Harris said, it's, you know, there's no reason not to be transparent unless you're trying to hide something, in which case there's every reason to not be transparent. But I think in general, you know, we're trying to do good things in the city. I think there's a lot of good intentions, even if it's failed outcomes from the staff. I think most of the city council have good intentions, and, you know, and we should be sharing this with the residents so that you can give us feedback. Like, you know, like I said before, there's a lot of expertise out in the city that's not on council or on staff that we should be benefiting from, not shutting down.
All right, thank you. And I do apologize, Ms. King, that I skipped you. You should have gone.
Okay.
So that's my bad. I'm sorry.
Okay, I think that's a brilliant idea that the civic organizations can come up with a third-party expert that can give some input to the city. And I feel that that should take place in all of the big decisions that we have to make around the city. I just think it's brilliant. So I really believe that is a plus. So, and it will take care of the transparency and all of the other things, but having a third party, and whether that third party might agree with the staff, it's all well and good, but we would like to have that expert opinion from a third party.
All right. Thank you so much. Next question is, start with Councilwoman Jackson, is what approach do you support to increase affordable housing in Alexandria? For example, would there be a government-owned and managed housing, or should the city continue to grant developers variances in return for including temporary affordable units?
Thank you. Well, obviously, we do have an affordable housing crisis on our hands in Alexandria. We have for a long time. I know I've said before, growing up here, Fox Chase was the affordable housing, and now rents today have tripled what my mother was paying in the mid to late 80s. I mean, it's awful, honestly. And if we want people to continue to live here, what was just told to me walking, canvassing the other day, you know, it was probably a 20-year-old young man who said, you know, we can't live here, but we're making it so everybody can come back and buy something now that used to live here. And I agree. And it is not fair. It is not balanced. We need to have some, we have to have like inclusionary zoning process here. We have to have a little bit more. I mean, you know, getting what, not even 10%, probably 5 or 6% units for every developer that brings something to the table that's going to be affordable housing. That's ridiculous. But, you know, we haven't figured out how to say no to the developers either when they're at least bringing something. And then on top of that, we also have our density.
Sorry, thank you. Next is Ms. King.
I know that we are in a housing crisis here. Our middle class or the, most people have to be making way over six figures to actually even rent here. And so what I look at the statistics, and I was looking at from 2010 up to a present time that we have been gaining 1,000 people a year, and that's a lot of people. But they don't tell how many people we are losing. We're losing a lot of people to North Carolina, to Fairfax County, to Maryland, people that we love, and because they cannot afford to live here. We're talking about our firefighters, first responders. So if something have to be done, and so I'm looking at alternative housing, maybe that we can have some restrictions lifted, so people who already have open green or open space here in the city to be able to build or have attachments on some of the homes, because people are willing to do that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Schiffer.
Lost my mouse. There we go. Yeah, I think this is actually one of the issues where my experience sets me apart. I think you'll find that most of the candidates running, we all have sort of the same views. You know, there's some minor differences, but in this case, you know, I take my success to be attributable to three things: education, hard work, and I bought my first house for $50,000 when I was in grad school. So, you know, so I was able to benefit from increasing prices as I went on through my life. And I was in school for a long time, and so that helped a lot. With people renting, they're not getting ahead, right? And so we're by allowing increased density and a few affordable units for a short period of time, which then revert back to market rate, doesn't solve the problem. So I've put forward a proposal where we take private investment to buy housing, subsidized with money from the city, and allow people to gain equity when living in that housing. And that's the only way that they're going to get out of that cycle. And that way they'll benefit from the rising prices that are going to happen in Alexandria, no matter what we do, rather than be drowned by that rising tide.
Right, thank you. And last response from Mr. Harris, please.
Yeah, so I mean, we are dealing with an affordable housing crisis. You have to think about we're dealing with a city where the only way their children, we have parents who the only way their children are going to live in Alexandria is if they give them their home. Only 9 of our firefighters live in the city that work here. We're also losing a lot of teachers, firefighters, and police officers to neighboring jurisdictions because they can't afford to live in Alexandria, and they're having to deal with that commute coming all the way here. And then also we you think about, we lost 90%, and with that, affordable housing has gone people of color, right? That are getting pushed all the way out into Prince William County, away from public transportation, away from job opportunities. And so it's one of those things that I'm a commissioner on the ARHAR, Alexandria Redevelopment Housing Authority Board. We provide affordable housing at the lowest AMI level. We have to explore every option in our tool belt in order to provide affordable housing for the city of Alexandria. I don't think it's anything that we can rule out and only look at 1 or 2 options. We have to look at everything. And I think that's the only responsible thing to do if we're going to make a credible and good decision. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much on that. Next question also relates back to affordable housing. What is your position on placing affordable housing on school property? Would you support an ordinance or formal policy statement that bars co-locating housing on ACPS grounds? So with that, we start with Mr. Schiffer.
Yes, I'm totally against putting housing on school grounds. We already have a problem with school capacity. I think we need that grounds for school and school related activities. And I think smashing one problem, which is not enough space for children to go to school, with another problem, which is not enough affordable housing, we make everything worse. I think there are other ways to address affordable housing, and I think we should look at those. And I think we should leave school grounds for schools, educational related activities, playing fields, etc.
All right, thank you. Mr. Harris.
So I am in favor of co-location. Again, I just think that it's one of those things we have to explore every single option. Again, you have to understand my background. I attended a boarding school. My teachers lived on campus with us. I think it can lend to improving the educational situation. I think that teachers could do a lot better if we have teachers that actually live in the communities and are able to interact with the students to that level and to that degree where they're there and not having to go away. They'll be more familiar with the communities that they serve in. And so it's just one of those situations. I think we have to explore every single thing that we have access to, because this is a crisis, and it's not one of those things that you can just rule things out, because you have to think about how many people have been put outside of our city and how many people that work here who can't live here. And when you're in a crisis, sometimes you make decisions, sometimes that you may not, will may make in another situation, but it's something that we really have to look at and explore all the options. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Jackson?
Yes, thank you. So I've been loud about this too. When it comes to co-housing, I prefer not to do that for the reasons stated of we have too many schools that are already over enrolled. And we need to, when we rebuild, we need the space that those schools are already on. Now, I understand that there are some, just a couple that will probably have housing related to it, like in Potomac Yard, because that was already set in a plan. But when we're talking about actual land like MacArthur or George Mason Elementary, Patrick Henry, honestly, also where it was already rebuilt, that I think it needs to be used for our schools or for any recreational programs, anything that has services related to it that community can also share with what the school's land provides, but not housing. And I also say that as a former teacher by trade. I can tell you, I didn't want to go grocery shopping for fear that I'd have to have a parent-teacher conference in aisle 5. So I really didn't want to live with, but I also understand the boarding school part, because you have teachers probably as part of their paying to be with the kids.
Thank you. And Ms. King?
I am not for co-locations for the schools, and for several reasons. And I meant, if it's just teachers in a boarding school situation, that is completely different. But I don't think that they're going to exclude it. I mean, they're going to include everybody to be actually renting on top of the school. So I just am not for it, but I would be, if they want to, let's say, an engineer will probably do something to add in that space, maybe having like a boys and girls club chapter or something like that, where they can go and actually have after school classes, like so many of us said, recreational, but like they have a boys and girls club or something above the schools, but not living. I don't think that idea should be scrapped, to tell you the truth.
All right, thank you. Next question is regarding boards and commissions. And we'll start with you, Mr. Harris. How would you make boards, commissions, and committees more representative of Alexandria's diverse communities and neighborhoods? Would you support a requirement that Central Alexandria and the West End be given as many voting seats as the East End of the city?
Well, I'm definitely somebody who this is something that's right up my alley, because it's something that I've been pushing for, to make sure that we have more equity on our boards and commissions, so they're more reflective of our communities. I've definitely worked really hard to make sure that minority members of our community are able to get on these boards and commissions, because most of them are predominantly white, and you don't have an opportunity to get a true reflection of what's going on in the communities and in Alexandria, because we're only hearing from one segment of the population. And so that's why we have people now on the Economic Opportunity Board Commission. I'm on the Alexandria Redevelopment Housing Authority Board. We We have people on the Juvenile Justice Detention Center Board, because like when children of color are arrested, we want to make sure that we have people there that they don't get stuck in the system and are actually being rehabilitated and not just get recycled through those things. So I think boards and commissions is very important that we make sure that they are equitable, make sure that they are truly a reflection of our communities, so that we can have a more balanced voice and have a balanced approach towards resolving some of the situations in our city. So thanks.
Thank you. Councilwoman Jackson.
Yes, sir. So I believe that we do need to do some other things in order to make it more equitable, more diverse. I don't know just percentage wise, because the West End has more people than the East End, whether that's a good way to do that. I do think a few other things though. I think because boards and commissions generally meet in the evening about 7 p.m. So that rules out a lot of women, because they have families. Like right now, this is all taking place during bedtime and you can't hear everything else because I'm being muted. But we have to look at everybody else's lives. And if they work 2 or 3 jobs, which a lot of people do, then why can't we do 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. on Saturdays or Sunday mornings? But I think when you have these commissions, it's an automatic 7 p.m. on some of these things, when maybe they should take a majority vote and say, when can we meet? And then that is the actual time. But there's a lot of other things at play here, not just the color of people's skin, but their actual living day to day that needs to be brought into consideration as well.
Right. Thank you. Ms. King.
I can speak for the commissions that I have actually served on. Now, the Commission on Employment is located on the West End on North Beauregard Street. We meet there. And I was the chair of that commission, and we had a beautiful representation of diversity, male, female, African-American, Latinos for the Commission on Employment, as well as I was a liaison for the Economic Opportunities Commission. Same thing, across the board, Latinos, African-Americans, male and female, senior citizens and all. And the only one that may not have as much diversity was the Alexandria, which is ACE, Alexandria Historic Resource Commission. I think I might have been the only one, but I could see some diversity there. But other than that, all of the other commissions that I was affiliated with. And another one, we have representative, we have a liaison representative for the Criminal Justice Commission. And I see the same thing, diversity across that commission. So I don't know how the, Kevin Mike can attest to how many.
Right, thank you for that. And lastly, Mr. Schiffer.
Yep. So I think this is similar to the previous question about representation. I think we have a very large city, and as I said, it's very heterogeneous. Excuse me. So I think it makes sense to apportion some slots on the boards based on geographic representation. But I think you can decompose this problem into 2 things. One is the geographic representation piece, and then another one is equity, as Mr. Harris was speaking to. And I agree with everything that he said, and Ms. Jackson as well. It's I think that, you know, now that we've had the pandemic and we've had meetings online, we have Zoom, you know, we can start looking at different ways to host these boards and commissions rather than just the old way. And so, you know, one, if we're hosting on Zoom and people don't have to get there from their house, and so if they have children, they can still participate. Great. And you know, another thing is times. You know, maybe we have rotating times. We don't always have them at 7 p.m. on Mondays, but you know, to accommodate more people, I think absolutely we can do this.
All right, thank you so much for your responses there. Next question is, do you support returning to a ward system whereby the city would be divided into equally sized areas and each would elect a resident of that ward to council, perhaps with 1 or 2 at-large council members? Please explain. And we'll start with you on that, Mr. Schiffer.
Absolutely not. No, just kidding. So absolutely, I totally think that's a good idea. As I said, it's very difficult to represent 160,000 people, and my personal favorite is a hybrid solution where we have some wards, the mayor is at large, we have 1 or 2 council members at large, and I think in that way we would make sure that all parts of the city are represented. Where I moved from in Somerville, Massachusetts, we had a ward system with some at-large members. It worked great. However, I will say that I am only for this if a majority of the residents are also for this, right? Like, I think this is a great idea. I know that some people don't, and I'm not here to impose my views. I am here to represent people. But if we as a city believe that that is the best way to go, then I'm absolutely on board with that. And if we as a city believe that's not the best way to go, then tough luck for me. I'll just have to spend some time trying to convince people.
All right, thank you. Mr. Harris.
Yeah, so I was gonna, say and chime in the same manner is that, it really doesn't matter. I mean, I have a certain thought, but it really doesn't matter what I think. These are one of those things that we have to hear from the community and really talk to everyone about and consider all voices, all the communities, because, people and this is something I've learned as being a minister, is people are inherently resistant to change, right? It's not something that people embrace easily because change brings a lot of other issues sometimes, things, and especially this would be something new to the city. And it could also hurt some people who may want to run or do different things, or you live in certain communities and may not bring enough equity in the community. And so it's something that we really have to think about, because that really could change the entire dynamic of what the city council looks like. And so we want to make sure that we do that and think about everybody who's involved. And so we have to make sure that we abide by that number one rule of being a public official, and that's listening to the community. Right.
All right, thank you. Councilwoman Jackson.
Yes, so I agree with public input, and I think, yes, we should have it in some town halls on this, learning, listening tours. Right now, I think that it is not a good idea because we have a lot of engaged people in our community, and it may be lopsided. So that, you might have 20 people in that one ward, and then you don't have a really good representative who needs or wants to run somewhere else. I also feel that when you're a public servant to the city, you really should know everything that's going on everywhere, because one puzzle piece in your neck of the woods may connect, and usually does, to something else somewhere else, that it's, everything goes together. And I would hate for anything to fall through the cracks just because we have a ward system and maybe someone who is really not as engaged in that one ward, and then those people don't have the representation that they need when taking a vote, honestly. So thank you.
Thank you. Last report to you, Ms. King.
I'm for the wards because I have done a lot of door knocking on the West End, and a lot of people said, I don't see anybody from city council come through here. And so they're asking, are you my representative? Because they don't know that they don't have representatives. And I feel that if they did have wards and you are responsible for a certain amount of residents there, that you will be responsible. And if you're not, vote them out. And I look at it, I've heard people on city council saying that I got so many emails, thousands of emails for 1,000, close to 160,000 residents. So they can't get to all those emails. But if it's us, into wards, they can get to them and they'll be able to better serve them. So to me, you're serving them better as a ward representative, as being at large. You have the mayor as at large. And if you're talking about having at least 2 representatives at large, to me, it's a win-win situation to return to wards.
All right, thank you so much. Next question is, do you support the City Council's recent decision to eliminate funding for the school resource officers, despite the fact that the Alexandria School Board supported keeping the resource officers in the schools? So with that, we'll start with Mr. Harris.
All right. So this is an issue that has come up so many times with me door knocking and going through the communities. And I always have the same answer. Yes, I'm in favor of getting rid of the school resource officers. And the reason why is because you have to understand, me being a young man of color and attending schools that have had school resource officers, I've seen so many times how minor disciplinary issues have turned into criminal issues. I've had friends personally who've been sent to juvenile detention centers for things that, that don't even make sense. We've had reports of kids getting arrested for writing on school walls because now that's become damaging property and things like that. And that's what I was telling some of the parents at the door. I'm like, I have a lot of kids in my house, 4 daughters, and they've written on my walls and I've never called the police. They've talked back to me and I've never called the police. And so I just think it's one of those things that it's not necessary. And if you're concerned about safety, I don't think someone, when they're about to approach a school, they're not going to go in there and do any harm because they have a school resource officer. So thank you.
All right. Thank you for that response. Councilwoman Jackson.
Yes, sir. So I was the one to hold my ground the other night on this particular decision for a few reasons. One, I did not want to take $800,000 away from the police because they didn't do anything wrong. It had already been a school board decision from 6-3 vote. And I felt that the city council's budget decision, it was an add delete, it wasn't even a policy discussion or decision, had undermined the school board and everything they had already gone through with their constituency, their parents, their teachers, their principals, their kids, their students. Everyone had already had input into this decision. So I don't feel it was city council that should have done what they did at that particular time. Also, again, my career as a teacher, I know that the SROs have always been part of the admin team, even though unofficially at best. But they always had a great rapport with us, and they had information on the community that maybe the teachers and the school administration didn't know about, the insider information. So I'll leave it there. I don't have enough time to go into everything. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. King.
I have to agree with the students and with the people I've listened to. You can call it resource officer if you want to, but it's police officer in the school. And I feel that they're not as protected as they're intimidated in a sense. And I feel that we can do better, that we don't really need a resource officer in the schools. That's the way I feel about it. So.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Schiffer.
Yeah, this is a complex issue, and I'm going to try to get through as much of this as I can, but follow up with me if you want to hear more. So recall SRO fondling his gun, accidentally discharged it in a school 3 years ago. Not a fan of guns in schools. This is why. There absolutely are, unfortunately, safety issues and fights at the high school. Could be at other schools as well. I don't know. The SROs were doing more than enforcing safety. They were a connection between the police and the community, in particular reaching out to at-risk kids in a positive way. Given the current climate in the country, many kids of color expressed that they weren't comfortable with armed resource officers in the school. And in fact, my daughter, not a child of color, is uncomfortable around police, she told me, because they have guns. So I don't think the city council should have overruled the board. That's why we have a board, to make those decisions. And if you don't like what the board does, vote them out. If you want city council to run the schools, well, let's get rid of the school board, right? Like there's sort of a process thing here. But I would say that I bet most would agree we want to protect children in our schools. I bet most want a good relationship between police and the community. I bet few want guns in schools just to have guns in schools. And I bet we want all kids to feel comfortable while they're trying to learn. And so I think there are other ways that we could have done this. We could have banned the guns, not the SROs, right? Like if we need to have guns nearby or have a gun safe where they can go in the.
Thank you so much. I know there's always a lot to say on this topic, and there's a lot of opinions spread out. So next question, and we'll start with Councilwoman Jackson, is what is the number one thing that you would do in the city to address climate change?
Wait, only I have a minute for an environmental question. Okay, so I'm like, well, let's see all the flooding. So we need to use our American Rescue Plan money to at least, help get that underway and not kick that can down the road any further. I can't change how much rain is coming, but I know, the best thing that I would like to see happen is electric charging stations, and get people in electric cars, because I don't think cars are going to go away. I really don't. But we also have brand new electric buses, and more of that fleet is coming. And now we need actual charging stations so that they're not just on personal property, because we have several homes that probably have that, and we have a bus barn that has that for the buses. But I haven't seen anything like in Fairfax County. I've seen quite a few charging stations, and that is what we should be starting to bring here. Not to mention, of course, we have Capital Bike Share. We have things like that do help with the pollution aspect of this. But yeah, that. But also infrastructure, because we have to stop the flooding. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. King.
You're right about the flash flooding. It has affected a lot of people, including my business. It flooded 3 times in the past 14 months, and it's devastating, believe it or not. I can say it easily, but it's devastating. So we need to address that, and we know that's part of climate change. As well as, I really agree with Amy about the charging stations. My company, before I was at 100 Dangerfield, I was at an architecture firm, and most of the employees or staff there had charging stations on that house. It was a house that was built into an office, and I thought it was great. I said, I need to get me an electric car. So I really feel that if we as individuals want to actually address climate change, we can make it more accessible by having charging stations all over the place, because it's going to help 2 ways. It's going to help the pollution, and it's going to help us efficiency, and it will help a lot with the climate change. But the infrastructure, we need to really do something about that with Rosemont and all of the residential flooding, because I know how it affected my business. So we are no longer in a 100 or 50-year flooding. It's like every year. So we need to do something about it and use those funds for that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Schiffer.
What a terrible question for 1 minute. It's just, so I'm going to try to answer this with sort of like policy and procedure, right? So it turns out we have a bunch of great things going on in this city that you probably don't know about. We have the tree canopy program. We have a solar power program, right? I'm sure there's even more. The problem is we've got too many, nobody knows about them. What we need is focus. So why don't we do something like take 3 months, and all anybody talks about is planting trees, right? Plant some trees for 3 months, work on the canopy, then we move on. And for the next 3 months, all anybody's going to talk about are solar panels on the roofs, right? So that's one way to address these things and get them done. The other piece is making things easier. I come from industry. I come from the tech industry. You don't use your iPhone because somebody made the other things harder to use. You use your iPhone because Apple made it easy to use. So what we need to do is we need to make mass transit easy to use, right? We need to encourage people to find alternative modes that don't contribute to climate change. And we do that by making it easier for them to do the right thing.
Thank you. And last response from Mr. Harris.
Yes. So I think this would probably be something won't be hard to do in Alexandria. And when I say that, I mean, everyone that I've talked to is always speaking about how they love the walkability of Alexandria. So getting people out of cars shouldn't be a hard thing to do. But I definitely think it starts with transit. I think we're taking a step in the right direction in terms of making Dash free. I think that'll help a lot of families who are working and trying to get around the city and needing to do things that'll help relieve some of the financial burdens, especially after COVID. But then also our infrastructure, I think is very important that we build that. And I think I would take it a step further in terms of, these charging stations, how we're going to build them in terms of being able to use some of the union labor where we can train. We have 60% of our students in Alexandria on free and reduced lunch. We can use that union labor to help train those families and in terms of having skills and to be able to put some money in their pockets to make it easier for their life here in the city, being able to take care of some of their financial responsibilities. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And for the last question this evening, before we get the wrap up, we'll start response with Ms. King. As you know, there's a perception that the current city council lacks transparency. Would you support signing a pledge to uphold a specific ethical standard and to support full transparency in city business, including making all text and discussions between council members and staff, particularly in staff, public under FOIA?
I have to agree with that because everybody complains about transparency. And they tell us that, oh, well, we're sending alerts, we're sending out emails, we're sending out, but everybody do not have access to that. And so I feel that they should make a concerted effort to actually address transparency by, of course, first and foremost, community engagement, town hall meetings. I feel that we don't have enough of it. We can say that you're not doing anything under the table, but we want to be able to prove that so people can feel comfortable so they can actually have trust in our city council. We don't want people who feel that, okay, the city council is acting like a holy huddle and they have an autonomy and not including the people. So I really thoroughly believe in transparency.
All right, thank you. Mr. Schiffer.
Yeah, a big difference between me and some of the members of council is that I believe that the city is responsible to the residents. Not you vote us in and then we do what we want because you voted us in and gave us a job. You're the boss. And I am all in favor of transparency. If you go to my website, www.markschiffer.info, you'll see I have a whole page on ethics. And what I'd like to do, not only would I open up, all communications to FOIAs, I would probably want all communications that are, that aren't privileged open just in general. But I also want to have an independent ethics officer in the city. I want to have ethics with teeth in the city. And 3 years ago, we had an ethics panel that made a bunch of recommendations. The city watered them down and passed some watered down version. I'd like to go back to those recommendations and I'd like to pass those as recommended by that panel.
All right, thank you. Mr. Harris.
Yeah, so I'm just going to echo the same thing I talked about earlier. I'm all in favor of transparency. I don't feel like there's anything to hide. We're here to serve our constituents, serve the city, make it better. I think that's something that we all can mutually agree on, that every Alexandrian wants. Sometimes we disagree about the way to go about it, but nevertheless, we all want the same thing. We have a heart to make it a better city. And so in terms of having discussions and sharing what I'm talking about and thoughts that I have, I'm open to it because I'm also open to suggestions because I just think that it just makes things better. Two heads are always better than one, and we want to always try to leverage the think tanks and leverage the opportunities. We have these charrettes and things like that, but we have to also, again, like I said, we have to make sure that we're opening up all these opportunities to the entire community and not just focusing on one loud segment of the population, but making sure that we figure out ways to hear from other populations that aren't as vocal and making sure that they have opportunities to weigh in on what they would like to see for the city as well. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And last response for Councilwoman Jackson.
Sure, thank you. So when I was installed in January of 2019, one of the first things we did sign, all council members and the mayor, was the ethics pledge. It was put in front of us. So right after we signed on that we were taking this seriously and being a community service, yes, we're signing up for this. It was at everyone's placement at the table on the stage at TC Williams that night, and we all signed it there and then handed them over to our city attorney, I believe, and clerk of council, who has them on record if anyone would like to see that ethics pledge. The other thing is there are sunshine laws. So sunshine laws for not only council, but for our boards and commissions, where not more than 2 people is okay on a board or commission, the same one, the same board or the same commission or the same council. 2 is okay. 3, it needs to be a public meeting, a public hearing, and it needs to be put out there for the public to know that we're meeting in that capacity. So just things to be aware of concerning transparency, but yes, I'm all for that. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to be your moderator for this evening's event. Thank you to all the candidates for participating this evening. Thank you to the residents for joining this evening's forum. I think this was very productive. I know I've learned an awful lot about all of you, and we have an awful lot of issues facing this city. And I really appreciate hearing your thoughts and opinions so that all of our residents can be better informed voters. And so thank you again. Jeannie, over to you to close us out. And you all have a good evening.
Thank you, Mike. I want to thank all of the candidates for sharing their time with us this evening. The residents of Seminary Ridge greatly appreciate your willingness to be here with us and to share your reasons for running for city council. Also, thank you for everyone in Seminary Ridge who joined us this evening to listen to the candidates. I think we've learned a lot about their positions on issues affecting our community. Our fourth and our final forum with the candidates vying for mayor of Alexandria will be this Thursday evening, May 27th. Again, it will begin at 7 p.m., but it will be only 1 hour long. So mark your calendars for Thursday and join us for the fourth and final SRCA forum. Again, thank you to Mike Souza for being our moderator this evening, and to Richie Weinblinger for making this third forum run so smoothly. Remember, the Democrat primary is on Tuesday, June 8th, and it is open to all registered voters in Alexandria. Mark your calendars and remember to vote. Finally, a special thank you and best wishes to all of the candidates who participated this evening. Good night, and I hope to see you all again on Thursday evening.
And Jean, if you don't mind my adding, you can vote early at the center across from the City Hall on Royal Street at the voting office.
Voting registration. Yes. Thank you. Thank you all for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.